Somebody tough enough to pull this outfit together.
Patton?
Possibly.
Take it easy, Big Joe.
So no one's going to get to Arnhem Bridge except on foot?
Sandbag bunker right under the station.
Ideals are peaceful. History is violent.
Hello, one and all. Welcome to the Tattoo Historians YouTube channel. Thank you all for being here. I'm sure a lot of you came from Paul's World War II TV channel. Welcome to everyone from that channel as well. Paul, how are you? Good evening, my friend.
I'm good. Yeah. I've just come off one live stream, but now here to talk about war films. So I'm good.
Yeah, a little laid back kind of conversation instead of being, bombarded with more of the normal. Let's do something a little bit different, right? So thank you to everyone in the chat who's been speaking. My name is John. I am the Tattoo Historian for anyone who does not know who I am. These are some kinds of live events that I like to do where we do the top 3 of something in history or that involves history, like the historical war films, in this case, World War II movies, obviously. We've done historical shipwrecks, all kinds of crazy stuff. So there's actually a playlist on here that is the top 3. And we'll be doing more of these, throughout the rest of the year. So appreciate everyone hanging out with us this evening. Really happy, Paul, that you could be here to do this one. And I'm really excited for people to see our list because I think there's going to be a few surprises that comes up here.
Definitely.
Yeah. So for everyone who doesn't know or has not seen this before, this works this way. We have 3 rounds of picks. We're going to start with number 3, and we're going to go all the way up to our number 1 pick. Paul will give his number 3 pick, and then I will give my number 3 pick. And then in the chat for a little bit, I'm going to have a poll question up as to which pick you enjoyed the most out of those. And that gives us time just to have some banter, maybe throw in some honorable mentions that didn't make the top 3, and talk with all of you in chat for a few moments while you vote. And then we go on to the second round, and then obviously to the first round. Again, it's just laid back. We want to see your favorites in the chat, and you get the opportunity to interact with us in various ways. So we're going to kick it off with our number 3 pick. And Paul, since you're the guest, you get to go first, my friend.
Well, here we go. And it is a completely left field choice. And what's interesting when you asked me this a couple of weeks ago, or maybe more than that now, is if you asked me yesterday, I would probably have changed my 3 again. And then in 2 weeks' time, they'll change again because that's how it is. It's like your favorite album. But when I grew up, the bit of context is I grew up with the comics and the war films. And it was all a very, very heroic portrayal of World War II. The Brits were always the good guys. The Japanese and Germans are always the bad guys. The Allies were the victors. They played fair. They did this. And I was fascinated by war films really early on. And I was about maybe 10 or 11. I bought this big kind of poster-sized book about war films and included ones that I'd never seen before because the regulars turned up on television. And this film turned up, and it was a Hammer-made film who were much better known for making horror films. It was called Yesterday's Enemy. I've got the Blu-ray that I now have here. And so Stanley Baker was in it, Gordon Jackson from The Great Escape and the Professionals, a TV show and back in the 70s and 80s. And the image in the book was really kind of stark. And there's a little bit of text about it. So it was dark and it was like an anti-hero. And I was like, wow. And it took me probably another 15, maybe 20 years before I actually got around to seeing it because it was never on TV. And then it finally came out. And I had it on DVD first, I think. And then or maybe I've seen it online first. Then I bought the Blu-ray. And wow. So I appreciate that a lot of people watching here won't know it, although Willie in the sidebar knows it. And Fighting on Film on their podcast covered it. So what's so great about it is the hero is an anti-hero. It's think more kind of Vietnam movies like Platoon, Casualties of War. It's about morality. It's about, is it okay to lose a couple of innocent lives if it saves thousands of other innocent lives? That's basically the question. And I'll be careful not to give too much away, because there'll be my number one movie. You'll all know it intimately, but this one, I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't gone and seen it. But basically, it's in the jungle, and it's all studio bound. It's all black and white. You can tell it was made in a set the size of a back garden, but inside it's the same pot plant they move around. It belies its stage origins. And basically, this British patrol in the jungle come across a community in Burma, and they think that these Burmese civilians may have information about Japanese movements. And the commander, Stanley Baker, who is playing kind of so many of the war films that era, it was a posh upper class British officer. He's working class. The actor was from the Welsh, coal mines, and he doesn't try and put on an upper crust accent. He's an officer. Maybe he's up through the ranks. I don't think the movie explains how he became an officer. And he's presented with this dilemma, and basically he pushes the morality and codes of war to a point where you're going, wow, that's probably not quite right. Or is it? Because he's very, very clear about the fact that if the methods he used will save lives, that's it. Think about how many lives have we saved. And then, without spoiling things, the situation was reversed and the Japanese get the upper hand. And a Japanese officer, played by a Korean American actor called Philip Ahn, we turned the tables on Stanley Baker. There's Leo McKern, who was much better known in Britain for Rumpole of the Bailey, a kind of a comedy drama about a judge in the 70s and 80s, is a kind of a cynical war correspondent who's sort of the voice of the audience. And then Guy Rolfe, who made lots of theatre, not a very well-known name, he's a priest. And so he's kind of the moral compass. So these figures are presenting the various arguments about what is okay in war. And it's, Bruce Day's mentioning in the sidebar, so it's kind of got echoes of Bridge of the River Kwai, except that Alec Guinness's character in the Bridge of the River Kwai is kind of not an idiot, but he's certainly from an upper class, and he's misguided. Stanley Baker as the platoon commander, what his intentions are. It's whether or not he's using the right methods. Think more like Cillian Murphy in Peaky Blinders, that kind of modern anti-hero where is it a good guy doing bad things, or is it a bad guy doing good things? That kind of moral ambiguity. And it ends with a really stark scene. And then it cuts to a shot of a Commonwealth War Grave cemetery in India, I think. And it says that they gave there today, so for our future, that kind of thing. And when I first saw it, it was like, it just absolutely knocked me for six, because it wasn't how war films are. War films, there is no happy ending. It's dark. It's presents you with this really ambiguous question about what's right. You kind of start thinking about like the aerial bombing of Germany, and is it okay to bomb civilians if they're making arms? And that doesn't come up in the conversation, but it kind of makes you think of that type of stuff. And so anyway, that's my pick. It's just one of those movies that, unlike all the other 50s British movies, and in fairness, the American 50s movies that are great, but they wash over you. They're like, yeah, here's the hero again. You get the odd one like Bridges at Toko-ri about Korea, where the hero dies, and in fact most of the heroes die. But Yesterday's Enemy is really, really bleak. It's you kind of are put off reading about war for a while. You're put off watching war movies. So there we are. That's my first pick.
That's a strong start, everyone, to this list, because it's got a different kind of message to it, and I really enjoy that messaging of that kind of war movie. And I have yet to see it, so I have to watch this and to be able to properly comment.
Don't do it if you're feeling a bit down that day.
No,
if you're having a day with, don't watch that, and don't watch Come and See, the Russian war movie. If you're feeling a little bit down, if you're feeling a bit down, watch something like Kelly's Heroes. That's the kind of movie to cheer you up. But don't watch this if you're feeling a bit, because it'll just it will upset you. But yeah, no, it's probably the one that I wouldn't put in my top 10 again next time you ask me, but I had just recently watched it and it had that same effect where I was like, whoa, so.
There you go. I saw some people in the chat earlier saying there's changes every week, their favorite films. So
yeah,
I think that's just natural. We're kind of like, oh, what are we in the mood for this week to call our favorite sometimes? Or there's a couple that, like, one of my choices is stuck in my top 3 for years. But yeah, if I ask us, if we do this again in a month, I'm sure 1 or 2 might have changed. Who knows?
Definitely. Yeah.
But yeah, very strong pick, and I need to watch that one to really understand. I am going to watch that. For mine, I have to go with one that I found 15 years ago or so. I was just flipping through Netflix, I guess, or something, and I was like, oh, what's this movie? This one's kind of interesting. Because it's another movie about the Germans that I haven't seen, and I wanted to see it, and it was a foreign film. So my number 3 pick tonight is Downfall, because I liked how it was based on Truddle Younga's reminiscences about being Hitler's personal secretary. It's the last 10 days of Hitler's reign. It's Der Untergang was released as in 2004. And starring the late Bruno Ganz as Adolf Hitler. He actually says about his performance, ultimately, I could not get to the heart of Hitler because there was none. He really tried to connect, and he's like, no, I can't connect with this man. Ganz even researched for the part for months and studied recordings of Hitler to properly mimic his dialect, his Austrian dialect. So he was really deeply enthusiastic about trying to get it right and trying to figure out how to play this person who obviously he was going to have no connection with. As I say, it was based on eyewitness testimony of the last 10 days, which Truddle Younga, Hitler's personal secretary, did a remarkable job of actually being a consultant on this film in her final days. This was nominated for an Oscar Best Foreign Language Film in 2005. Bernd Eichinger was the producer and screenwriter. He was famous for also writing the Fantastic Four and Resident Evil movies. So you're really big difference here.
Genre switch there, yeah.
Yeah, flipping it up here a little bit and flipping things around. He was inspired to deliver the film because he had read Joachim Fest's Inside Hitler's Bunker, The Last Days of the Third Reich. So that made him really interested in making this film. Actually, many of the outdoor scenes that you see outside of the bunker were filmed in St. Petersburg, Russia, due to their Germanic aspects in the architecture. And plus, there was this old abandoned industrial district right along a canal in St. Petersburg, and they decided this would be the perfect backdrop for Berlin 1945. The Russian press, though, came around from time to time and were sneaking around trying to get the latest scoop and figure out what was going on in St. Petersburg. And this really irritated some people on the set because they're wondering why this Russian press is starting to come and hang out around the area. And Yana Bajansky, she's a director with Globus Film, who was a partner to Constantine Films, who did Downfall. They're their Russian partners. She would actually berate the press for showing up, and she yelled to them, "This is an anti-fascist film, and nowhere in it do you see Hitler praised." And after she yelled at them again, they left. They were done wondering what was going on with that. But as I said, Truddle Younga helped write the film. She was a consultant. She appears at the conclusion of the film to talk about her feelings of guilt and responsibility for what she experienced in those years. In the German release, the dialogue is after all the credits run, but in the British release, it's at the beginning of the credits, so it's not missed. So it really comes about of how do we perceive this idea of responsibility and guilt through the words of those who were there. How does that get brought across to the cultural aspect of this and to the public? And so the Germans put it clear at the end, and the British moved it up in front of the credits. And that's the way it was released in North America as well when I first saw it. And the film actually grossed almost 94 million US worldwide. So it did remarkably well for this kind of film. But it wasn't without a little bit of fun. As someone alluded to in the chat, there were people who made this into a bunch of memes. There were the videos where Hitler reacts to whatever is going on in the moment around the world. And Constantine Films actually tried to get that shut down. And they were like, could you please not have people do this? And actually went to places like YouTube or Facebook. MySpace even had some stuff popping up early on. And finally, it just became overwhelming and they gave up. So it became even a cultural kind of thing where people didn't maybe watch the film, but they remember one scene out of the film where Hitler's ranting about something going wrong. And that's when people realized what this actually was. So I think for me, this was one that I appreciated the fact that people who were involved at the time helped to consult and bring about some kind of authenticity to it. And it didn't make anyone look good really in the whole thing, which it shouldn't. So.
No, I agree. It's a great film. And my problem is exactly what was said in the comments, is that I've seen too many memes now. It's taken the edge off. It just doesn't quite have the power now, because just when you're building up as a viewer, when rewatching it, to the moment where you know, if you haven't already realized what a despicable regime the Third Reich is and what a batshit crazy the guy is, you start kind of thinking of the times you've seen that clip used for funny reasons, and it lessens the impact of it. And I mean, that's nobody's fault. It's not the filmmaker's fault. It's not. It's just that's what happens. But for me, that's why it would never be in my top 5 or 10 because of that. It's weak. It's weakened by the parodies. Yet conversely, when we talk about something like Kelly's Heroes, we all know the jokes from it. Bridge Too Far, we do jokes, we do quotes, but somehow that makes the affection for the film. But their film is trying to tell a different story for different reasons. Downfall is trying to, you know, it's not sugarcoating anything. It's, as you said, it's making a real statement. So that would be why it wouldn't make my top 10. It's incredible filmmaking, but we've taken the piss out of it too many times. It's lost its strength for me.
Yeah,
I agree with the viewers. They are funny though, and I still do laugh at them sometimes. Yeah, it's not. I can't help. I've got if they're done well, they're still funny.
I respect that. That's a good way of putting it. So because we're at the end of round 3, I'm going to be putting the poll question up because we're just doing this for fun. Nobody wins anything. Paul and I don't win anything out of this. It's just for fun and for more of us to discuss things with you here in the chat. The poll question is up and you can vote away for a couple minutes. Paul, did you have any honorable mentions that you would like to discuss between rounds?
Well, yeah, I mean, I wanted one of the films to be a British classic. And Yesterday's Enemy was my one of the 3 that was a British classic, really. You know, that era, that 50s golden era. Yeah. The honorable mention will be The Cruel Sea. Because it's just an amazing film. Bleak in a different kind of way. It is sort of looking at moral ambiguity and how wars affect people, but it's more of a kind of a character study and PTSD and the stresses of being on a ship. But you know, that also the best years of our lives came up in the sidebar. That's an American film, and it's just post-war. To me, that is such a powerful depiction of that, the coming out of World War II, because it was, for me, it's very interesting that the instant drop of the rah, let's sell war bonds type movies that both of our nations and Canada and everyone were doing, it dropped off immediately. Even by 45, 46, as we'll find out with one of your picks, they're starting to, you know, the war isn't quite over, and they're starting to really kind of undermine that it's all about, you know, paying for the war effort with some really hard-hitting movies. Then the Hays Code came in a few years later, and it went back to kind of the old kind of action movie. But there was a period in the late 40s, Decision at Dawn, the 51 German-made film, where they're really trying to ask some difficult questions. So there'd be quite a few from that 45 to about 1950 era. And then there's Polish films, there's Russian films. Kanal, the great Polish classic, nearly made it. Talvisota, the Finnish war film from the 90s, nearly made my list. It has made my top 3 in the past when I've done a podcast. It's like they often call it the Finnish Saving Private Ryan, although it's not set in 1944. It's set in the early part of the war when Finland was invaded. But that's a great film. But that's if we're sticking to World War II, people are doing other wars. They're doing Paths of Glory, which is a fantastic film, but not World War II. No. Film Metal Jacket, great movie, not World War II. But yeah, I mean, there are so many films you could put in a top 10. Yeah. What about your honorable mentions?
Just the other day, I watched Sink the Bismarck for about the 200th time, and that's just a classic to me. I grew up watching that film.
And Dana Winter, God, drools down my head.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I grew up watching a lot of those 50s, 60s films. My grandfather watched them all the time, and so it was what he watched as soon as he came out of the army in the 50s. He was watching that kind of stuff, and he passed it on to me. So it was that and Run Silent, Run Deep.
Oh yeah,
that was one of my favorites that I could watch over and over again. Of course, I'm a big Burt Lancaster fan. So Burt Lancaster is one of my favorite actors of all time. And, his performance in that. And then to know that that's like Don Rickles' first real big movie that he's done. And he always told the story about how who was it? Clark would tell him, hey, you got to know everything on this ship, or excuse me, Burt Lancaster told him, you need to know how this submarine works. So when we're doing the acting, you're really into it. And Clark would take him aside and be like, no, kid, don't worry about it. We're just shoot the damn film and get done and get me out of here. So it was good. I like that one. But cheesy older ones, people call them cheesy. The older stuff from the 50s where they're using the wrong tank or they're doing something. Okay. It's, to me, Hollywood and history only have one thing in common. They both begin with the same letter.
Yeah.
So I'm watching it for entertainment, and I'll take Run Silent, Run Deep. That's a decent one.
That's a very good one. Yeah, it's that era when we were talking about Masters of the Air on our show channel recently. Is that those old movies, they never really made an attempt to make it feel like you were really underwater in a submarine or you were behind the stick of a B-17. It was clearly just kind of something they'd cobbled together with cardboard in some cases. And, but we didn't care though, did we? We really didn't, it didn't matter. And some of the British desert movies were filmed clearly not in the desert, but it's like, should we take the crew to Libya or somewhere, or should we just use a bit of Wales and kind of lighten, do the saturation a bit on the print? No one will notice. That's cheap in the background, not camels. That kind of thing.
What can we get away with in the budget? To Hell and Back, another good one. There's one that I remember watching a lot of. There was another one in here. There's some thoughts on Battle of the Bulge, which I can understand, but there's some good ones floating around here. Thank you everybody for filling up the chat with that. I'm going to end the poll because we've been going for 5 minutes. After the first round, somehow Downfall took it 61-39, but I think that's probably because a lot of people haven't seen yesterday's end.
They've seen it. Yeah, no, I knew I was going to lose that one, and I will take that one on the chin. And hopefully those who are watching this will try and go and find it and have a look and come back and re-vote.
Because I'm sure it'll probably overtake Downfall, which is fine. I don't take it personally. I didn't shoot the movie, so
no, indeed.
So we're going to move on to round 2, everybody. This will be our second choice, obviously, as Winston is letting us know. This will be in our number 2 slots here, and we will move on from there. And Paul, take it away.
Well, funny that you mentioned Burt Lancaster, because he is the star of my next pick, and it is John Frankenheimer's The Train. Got my Blu-ray here. And, so many reasons why this is in my top list of movies. One, it is just a terrifically thrilling, doesn't overstay its welcome, not too long, just cool thriller. 2, it's all real. You see Burt Lancaster jumping on trains, jumping off trains, all the explosions, all the derailing of trains, all the strafing by aircraft. It's all pretty much in camera. There's no CGI crap. It is genuine stuff. It is all happening there. It's filmed in a kind of a very deep focus. Everything's there. It's all just really happening. You know, he genuinely had a limp when he was making it from the previous film he'd done. I forget what that was, and he kind of carried that limp through. So just a brilliant film. And for those who from your channel who don't know me from my channel, I live in France, and unfortunately, Hollywood and British movies, when they have a French resistance character, tends to be just the cliched, hello, kind of stick about berry. There's a terrible Italian spaghetti movie, 1979, From Hell to Victory, with George Peppard is in it. And George Permatan L.A. Hamilton plays the French resistance guy. And it is as bad, if you haven't seen that movie, it is as bad as it sounds. And that was how it was all through that 50s, 60s, 70s. You just get any old guy, put a berry on him, and do some kind of cliched, cod, stupid Inspector Clouseau French accent. And The Train has some absolute bona fide French movie stars. Michel Simon, in one of his last role, who was a veteran of the silent movie in France, is Papa Boule, the old engine driver. Jean Moreau is in it. You know, it's full of really good, well-known French character actors who are being shown as nuanced individuals. It doesn't really try and explain the occupation of France, but it kind of it does hint at the complexity of being occupied and what is defiance, what is resistance. It's a question we've asked on my channel many times. You know, what is resistance? What is collaboration? You know, and Dr. Chris Millington is an academic, says that, you know, those words are very burdened. Resistance implies blowing up trains, and in this movie there is genuine blowing up trains by the resistance. But can resistance also mean just stopping the occupiers from doing stuff they want to do? So, you know, making trains take longer to get places. And in this case, if you don't know this film, folks, it's like the 1960s version of Monuments Men, but way better. It's about the fact the Germans are trying to ship artwork back to Germany from France, and France is trying to protect its heritage. And Burt Lancaster, as part of the resistance on the railroads, and historical fact, the French railway workers were a core. They were one of the biggest French resistance networks in France, because France was spending ages trying to unite its various resistance groups under one banner, which they eventually did. And they did some fantastic work because they had access. They had access to places. They could travel. They could do stuff. And yes, Scott, it's kind of based on a real story, but then kind of changed a bit. It is based on the woman in the museum in Paris that was played by Kate Blanchett in Monuments Men, but by Suzanne Vlon, I think her name is in France in this version. And and Burt Lancaster, rather like Stanley Baker in my first pick, he's like, at what point should we risk French lives or Allied lives to save artwork? At what point is art more valuable than human beings? And the woman from the museum is like, yes, but without culture, what is a culture? What is a country? A country, yes, a country needs to have its population, but if you have no history, if you have no culture, if France, for example, had come out of World War II without its paintings, without its sculptures, without its cathedrals, without its castles, would France have still existed? That's it's a question I'm not going to attempt to answer in this light conversation with you, John, but it is the sort of question that the Train is trying to ask, is that what's more important? But if you haven't seen the film and you're now thinking, oh, it's all going to be some kind of highfalutin moral, no, it's an action film that has this definitely running as an undercurrent, and it is just brilliant. I mean, I watched The Train just so often because it never ceases to grip me from beginning to end. It didn't do terribly well at the box office because it was black and white, which in 1964 everything had gone kind of full color. It was the era of CinemaScope and big widescreen, and it was the kind of the era of cramming in all the international stars. Think of The Longest Day a couple of years earlier. Is Paris Burning was going to come out a year later. It's the Bond film was full of, exotic locations and stuff. So it didn't do really well, though it didn't flop. But it just, for me, Burt Lancaster was never better. My only slight gripe with it is it maybe would have benefited from The Longest Day type of having the actors speaking their native languages. So the French have them speaking French and the German speaking, and maybe from having a German actor play the villain when it was the British stage actor Paul Schofield who played the German officer, who was brilliant, by the way. I'm not saying he wasn't brilliant because he was amazing, but maybe someone like Kurt Jürgens, Wolfgang Price, someone like that who was in the movie Wolfgang Price would have been better than having a British guy, because you've got an American as the lead Frenchman and a Brit as the lead German. Everybody else was their right nationality, but it is still a fantastic film, and obviously you've seen it, John. So what do you think?
I think the same thing. It's one of my favorites. It just was like probably in the number 4 position on my list. Like it fluctuates.
So you were pleased I brought it in there.
Yeah. Where it's like, okay, maybe next week it'll be 3. It's one of those it's a Lancaster movie that I remember seeing early in my life that I was really intrigued by, because I'm like, why is everyone so worried? As a kid, why are we worried about paintings and not people? And you don't really understand when you're young. You do when you're older, especially when you become like a historian or you work in the arts and humanities. Then you kind of understand it. And I love the parallel that you said about how it's kind of like the earlier and better version of Monuments Men.
Yeah,
it really is. And and like you say, it is an action movie. And it's one of my favorites of all time, of any war movie, really. It's one of my favorites. Probably, top 10 at least war movie of all time for me. Maybe creeping towards the top 5. It really is amazing. And I never thought of that aspect of having people speak their native language in the film. It would have probably made it stronger. So I tip my cap to that thought, because I really think you're right. That would have been the one thing that maybe we would have changed, or thought differently of, but it doesn't take away.
But then again, with the action, if you've been reading subtitles, maybe it would have, derailed it a bit, pun intended. I don't know, but I mean, when I say that having in their native language would have been better, I'm not saying it's not brilliant, because it is absolutely fantastic. It's just maybe if it was made today, they would make that conscious effort to have, a French lead actor and a German lead actor, etc., etc. And the other thing I should have said is although Burt Lancaster is the nominal star, the stars are the railways and the engines and the steam and the smoke and the dirt and the actual railway line is probably the biggest star in the movie. I mean, I'm not one of those hardcore railway buffs like Dr. Phil Blood, who's going to be on my channel tomorrow, who just loves railways. I had a model railway as a kid, but it was one of my different toys. But if you like steam engines, if you like trains, it's surely it's going to be like your Casablanca, your Gone with the Wind or something. You're the Magnificent Seven. It's got to be up there. Trains have never been quote unquote sexier on screen. And again, I love the fact that the strong French characters, because I love living in France. I hate all the jokes about the French running away in 1940 and all that. Tell that to 90,000 French men and women who died in 1940 trying to stop the Germans. And so that complexity of not only having the French as strong characters, and lots of, someone said in the sidebar, strong female characters as well, which in the 60s was rarer. The fact that they're not passive in the background. It's not like a war film that happens to be set in France where the French are just kind of part of the landscape. It is a French story, and that's why the Bridget Remargan just came out. That's a bloody brilliant film. That one's got to get a shout out too. Yeah. Thank you for that, Mad Cat. Appreciate that. That's a good one.
Obviously, Casablanca's in here. There's quite a few that have been popping up through here. I didn't get a chance to star them to bring them up. Everyone is really excited about their picks, and I'm glad to see that. But yeah, Richard Morgan, really good one. Definitely one that we need to give a shout out to as honorable mention.
Yeah.
But yeah, The Train is fantastic. It is, like I said, it's top 5 for me World War II movies, and it's probably in that number 4 slot right now. And you talk to me in 2 weeks, and it'll probably be 3. Who knows? But yeah, excellent stuff.
Well, we'll do yours. And I'm intrigued. Maybe I'll win this one, but I don't know. I'm not.
I think you might.
We'll see.
I think you might, because that's just a classic, right? The next one's a classic, but only to people who are like my age. So we're gonna have 2 good ones here, everybody. Round 2 is gonna get interesting because my pick is Das Boot for number 2. Directed by Wolfgang Petersen, and this is 1981. I'm not talking about the new TV miniseries that came out in 2018. Film's an adaptation of Lothar Gunther Buchheim's 1973 novel of the same name as the movie. He wrote of the experiences on U-96. Heinrich Lehmann Willenbrock, the captain of the U-96 and one of Germany's U-boat tonnage aces, was one of the consultants on the film. As you can tell, I like these folks coming in and being consultants, historical consultants on this. I'm really wow. See, I want Das Boot's score on vinyl too. I'm getting jealous of people in chat. I'm like, whoa, I need this on vinyl. Also, Hans Joachim Krug, former first officer of U-219, also served as a consultant on the film. The film had a budget of 18.5 million US at the time. That's 34 million US in today's money. And was the most expensive German war film, West German or East German, at that time. It grossed over 220 million US in today's money. So this was definitely a moneymaker for West Germany at that time. Remember, this is 1981, still the Cold War, still divided Germany. So it was a good moneymaker for them. What a lot of people don't know is that, or don't realize, is that there were 2 American versions of this that were supposed to come out ahead of time. One American production in 1976 was supposed to have Robert Redford as the Cologne, the captain of the vessel, which would be kind of, well, not kind of.
Let's be glad that didn't happen.
That would be atrocious. Robert Redford as the Cologne. That fell apart during negotiations. Thank God Robert Redford, screwed that up for himself. Another Hollywood production was attempted with Paul Newman as the Cologne, and that one fell through because they had tech issues. They couldn't figure out how to make 2 German subs work in tandem, or just submarines work in tandem at that time with the film, with the production crew they had. Excuse me, and it fell through. So no Robert Redford or Paul Newman as U-boat commanders. So thank God for that. The final film took 2 years to produce. It was about a year of filming with the men on board this in the stage production, if you will. Scenes were filmed in sequence so that their appearance was true to form. So their beards were correct. The length of their hair was correct. The cast was kept indoors at all times, so they looked pale, just like the submariners would. Several models of the U-boat were built, including a complete interior of U-96, and you can go to the film house in Bavaria and see the conning tower of U-96. It's just sitting outside, and it was the one that they used when you would see the scenes where it would come to the surface and pop out. There was a large tank that they would put this thing in and raise it up. Now it's just sitting outside, out in the open. We had Jürgen Prochnow as the Cologne. Herbert Gronemeyer and Klaus Veneman are your leads in this one. Gronemeyer is Lieutenant Werner, the war correspondent. He later just decides he wants to get out of the film industry and starts to just concentrate on his music career, which which lasted well into the 2000s apparently. And Venomon is the chief engineer on the U-boat. Klaus went on to do several TV series in Germany, but passed away from lung cancer in 2000. Prochnow, he did Dune in 84 right after doing this one, Beverly Hills Cop, The English Patient, which I saw came up in chat, and the Da Vinci Code. So he was very well rounded as far as that's concerned. And for everyone who remembers Wolfgang Peterson, he also directed The Never Ending Story, In the Line of Fire, The Perfect Storm, Troy, and a few others. But when I saw he did The Never Ending Story, I'm like, whoa, I forgot about that flick. Okay, that was Wolfgang. That's interesting. But this one is one that I always watch the director's cut. I watched the long version of it. And I do not watch the English dubbed version.
No, it's dreadful.
That's wrong. Just don't do that, everybody.
It's a crime. It's a crime. You should be locked away for it. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll lose points with me if you're like, I prefer that one. No, it needs to be the German, and that's just the way it is. But one of my favorites, and I remember the first time I watched it, I was so distraught at the end. So
that's coming up in the sidebar. The ending is
yeah, the ending really threw me, and I was upset as a kid, where I was like, wow, okay. So yeah, what do you think of that one, Paul? What do you think of Das?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, yeah, great. And I saw it first on the BBC, so they split the director's cut into like a 6-part TV show or something on BBC Two. So I saw it that way. And yeah, no, just amazing. And when I was a few years ago, I was in La Rochelle down in Brittany, where they filmed the subs leaving, and I couldn't help kind of have that reminiscence of that, and also Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they use the same U-boat pen. And yeah, no, great thing. And interesting, you mentioning the music, or someone mentioned this music there, because with my war movie hat on, there was that little spate of synthesizer music war films. There was Operation Daybreak in 1976, the first version of Operation Anthropoid with Anthony Andrews and Timothy Bottoms, that used synthesizer music. And then there was The Keep, a really odd film with Gabriel Byrne and who else was in that? It'll come to me later on. And that used music by Tangerine Dream, and it was very experimental. And now it's almost unwatchable because it just doesn't. It's not that I don't like. Well, I'm not a big fan of that kind of era of music, but somehow with Das Boot, the soundtrack, it gets better and better, whereas the other ones, it kind of really dates it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really does.
It really worked to enhance it somehow. So ABC likes Tangerine Dream, but it just for me when I watch The Keep now. Oh, and Ian McKellen is in The Keep, and it's kind of this it's a science fiction war film. It was really hard to get for a long time. I knew the production design on that because it was my friend who also worked on Bridge Too Far and what have you, whose name was just falling out of my head. He designed the snow speeder for Empire Strikes Back. I'm embarrassed. I can't remember my friend's name. But yeah, so that interesting. The music somehow has enhanced it with time, made it better almost.
Yeah, that's really an interesting thought, because I know a lot of people didn't like the newer version of All Quiet on the Western Front for various reasons. We're going World War I here for a second, but they didn't like the music in it because it was more like, I don't know, it was more contemporary. There was some rock influence. There was some, synthesizing elements to it and other things. And it's really going to date the piece, right? And so when we look back at when we look back Kelly's Heroes, I mean, that's all 70s or late 60s country music and stuff going on. It's like, okay, it doesn't fit, but okay, it's part of the entertainment factor of it. It's really interesting when you look back and you look at the scores. And I usually go buy soundtracks on vinyl just because of that reason, because I love that Technicolor era music and stuff. So when my wife comes home from work, she knows I'm playing some kind of weird, Technicolor era thing, or I have like the Ben-Hur soundtrack on or something going, because it's just background music for me and it reminds me of that kind of stuff.
There was just an amazing generation of of composers for films.
Oh, yeah.
Maurice Jarre, Jean-Michel Jarre's dad did so many, and Leonard Bernstein did a few, and and there were just some classic composers doing just incredible work. Well, I mean, I suppose there's still today as well, but yeah, the soundtracks. I mean, the British people, Ron Goodwin, for various films. The British people watching this remember the Jeff Love Orchestra LP of war movie themes. That hands up in the sidebar. Who had that? It had all a compilation of all the various war movie covers. So it was Battle of Britain and Where Eagles Dare and Lawrence of Arabia and Guns of Navarone and we all bought that album and wore it out. That I was playing that, and then I'd go on to the punk stuff I like, Jenny, but then I'd go back to the war movies theme. So there was a whole lot of people who kind of loved that stuff. Then later on, I got the cassette version of it when that was cool. Yeah, Willie's got a copy. I think we all did. I think. Das Boat, solid choice. So we better put that to the vote as well, then, John. And yeah,
there's another one. Guilty. There's another one. Yeah. It's interesting when you get us all together, and you find out that we have these little eccentric things about ourselves. It's eccentric to think about now. At the time, it was like that's what we did. But me collecting like vinyl soundtracks, you with that. And we could talk about scores involved in some of these movies and who developed them and why it was put in and stuff. But yeah. That's a different top three.
Old Monkey Bones. It was his first ever LP. So I've hit. I knew that would be something that would resonate. And other people were like, "What is he talking about?" It's but for the people of a certain age, it was an absolute must-have. Along with Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds. Which was the entirely different genre, but that was a must-have soundtrack LP when I was in my formative years. I'm still in my formative years.
yeah, I know that feeling. So I'm gonna cut off the poll because we got to get to our final picks here. Somehow Das Boot pulled that one out, 69-31.
Oh dear! God, now I'm struggling, aren't I? God dear!
I didn't expect that. I thought the train was going to take that one. Honestly,
I thought a bit of politeness to the newbie on the channel. Maybe there'd be. I'll get some sympathy votes, but we'll have to do it.
Maybe it's an age thing with some people where some of the younger people are coming into the chat and they're just like, oh, I remember Das Boot. I don't remember the train because. Some people, I don't know.
I have gone quite old with my choices because I am quite old.
I'm going old with
my first World War story favorites would have all been made more than 50 years ago.
Mine too.
Maybe more than 60 years ago, but yeah. Oh well, I lost that one. I want to address the fact that the Pattern as a movie came up earlier on, and incredible movie. Would never make one of my top 10 lists because there's so much of it that's a bit iffy, and a great movie. I enjoy watching it. But someone asked us what we thought of that, and George C. Scott was incredible. Normandy's clearly not Normandy. Germany's not Germany, and it's got that Battle of the Bulge kind of location shooting stuff. And I try to tell a big story, but without that, we wouldn't have had The Godfather. Because of Francis Ford Coppola being the screenwriter on Patton. So if for no other reason that we got Godfather, or indeed Godfather Part 2, which is, for my money, the better movie, marginally. And that's an interesting thing, because war movies, I'm going off on a woody tangent, a rabbit hole now, John, is that...
That's fine, go ahead.
War movies were often kind of a starting place for people moving out, because it wasn't considered kind of your mainstream movies back then. It was kind of where people kind of cut their teeth a bit and then they would move into something. So you see quite a lot of people like Francis Ford Coppola and people doing kind of screenwriting work would then go on to do bigger movies, but they kind of cut their teeth as secondary crew on war movies. And indeed, people like David Lean, who directed some amazing. He was second unit or assistant director on some early war movies. So it was kind of a good training ground in both sides of the pond for filmmakers and actors. I mean, you mentioned Robert Redford. He's one of his first appearances in War Hunt, the Korean War movie.
Right.
1962 was one of his first appearances. 7 years before Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. So you'll notice that now. You watch a war film and go, oh, hang on, that's him, isn't it? Well, look at Band of Brothers. Tom Hardy and those kind of guys in that, and Michael Fassbender. We're going off on a tangent.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I like tangents. It's good. George C. Scott, though, will always be Patton to me. When I see him in our movie, like he was in the Mussolini movie, and I'm like, what's Patton doing as Mussolini? Yeah.
Absolutely. And when you read a Churchill speech, you hear it in Churchill's voice. When you read a Patton speech, you don't hear it in Patton's voice. You hear it in George C. Scott's voice.
Exactly.
So which Patton I think would be pleased about, because his own voice he was a bit embarrassed about, because as we all know, it's a bit high pitched and squeaky. Right. And I think he'd have much preferred the cinematic portrayal. Albeit with a slightly false chin, I think George C. Scott wore. False nose, wasn't it? False nose he had.
False nose, yeah.
But, anyway.
Yeah. Patton would be delighted. He has a lower voice now. There's someone said it. George C. Scott is Ebenezer Scrooge. Yes.
That's true.
Yeah. Patton is Ebenezer Scrooge. Yes.
And he was in Islands in the Stream, Ernest Hemingway movie in the 70s with David Hemmings. Kind of odd, kind of set on a Pacific island war kind of drama. I remember watching quite a few times. I know David Hemmings' son Nolan a little bit. Interesting war film fact. Did you know, folks, that the jacket worn by David Hemmings in the Charge of the Light Brigade in 1968, when he's charging the guns, is the same jacket worn by Adamant in Stand and Deliver, the pop video, the very same jacket. There's an incredible little bit of tidbit for you there. Same jacket.
Wow. There's your pub trivia, everybody.
There's your pub trivia.
Fantastic. All right. We got to go to round one now. This is our number one pick, at least for this week, of top 3 World War II movies that are on our mind. Paul, what's your number one pick, my friend?
Well, I'm going to put it back with this. I mean, I've got to, if only for sympathy. So, I mean, I've gone away from historical accuracy. I've gone away from movies with a message to pure, unadulterated fun. Just war movie as escapism, adventure movie. Could have gone with Kelly's Heroes and with Donald Sutherland. Rest in peace, Mr. Sutherland. Recently, that I could have gone for Kelly's Heroes. I nearly went for Kelly's Heroes, but I had to go for Where Eagles Dare.
Yeah,
I mean, I just had to. 1968. Brian Hutton directed. Brian G. Hutton. Richard Burton's last big financial box office success, although he carried on making movies right through to 1984 with John Hurt. He never had a box office hit after of the size of this. He didn't really want to do it. His kind of kids persuaded him to do it. Clint Eastwood just breaking out. I mean, he'd done the spaghetti westerns. He'd finished with Rawhide, just started to make a name for himself. And yeah, I know all you're going to come back with the fact it's inauthentic. What about the bloody helicopter? What about all that stuff? The SS, Major Harpen has an Allgemeine SS uniform from 4, 5, 6 years earlier, not the right one there. And I don't give a shit, right? I don't care about the inaccuracies. From the moment that drum beat starts with the Ron Goodwin store, and you see the Junkers 52 come in there and the snow come up. From that moment, and I've seen the film 17 million times, and I'm not exaggerating much, I am hooked. And I watch it from the beginning to the end, and I just unashamedly watch it with a grin on my face. And I know that Clint Eastwood never reloads his MP40, and I know the broken glass in the window of the bus at the back keeps changing. I know Richard Burton is clearly not climbing up the rope to reach the window. All that stuff there, all that, I know all that, and I say I don't give a shit, right? and if this is a case for the defense of the film, right? My smoking gun is I was at the We Have Ways Fest last year. So James Holland and Al Murray's big event. And I'll be back there again this July. And on the Saturday night, I was in the green room because I'm one of the historians. I know that they kept saying there was going to be a star guest to come on in the evening and talk about stuff. And I knew who had been pushed out of being the star guest. This is for Gogglebox, where they discussed war. They sit on the stage and they discuss war movies like we're doing, but with a bigger live audience. And I knew who was bumped off because at the last minute they got this guest. And there's only literally one type of audience where this guy would come on and would be instantly recognized by every single person in the crowd, because it's a whole tent marquee full of people like us, just mostly middle-aged, a few young people, a few kids, a few older people, but mostly just warholics, people who love their history, love their war movies. And it was Darren Nesbitt who played Major Van Harpen at 88 years old, came on and did half an hour about the making of the movie, funny stories about being trained how to salute by a genuine SS guy who served under Himmler, all that kind of stuff, walking around on the movie set in his SS uniform, the making of it, Burton being drunk all the time, etc., etc., etc. And at the end of his half an hour, he just went. He didn't stay around. I was so hoping to meet him in the green room afterwards, but no, he'd done his bit. He'd earned his cash, and he was back in his taxi or driver to go off elsewhere. And the last movie I saw him, incidentally, where he played an aging drag queen. Now, there's another weird career, shift in that he was a number 2 in one of the Prisoner episodes of Patrick McGowan, famously, and a few other. He was villains in various kind of persuaders type shows back in the 60s and 70s, but never was a major star. But he was a drag queen. An aging drag queen trying to reunite with his child in a film made about 2 or 3 years ago. He was 85. It's called Tucked, ladies and gentlemen. Because men have to tuck their bit in a place to anyway. And I loved it. And so when he came on and did these stories, all of the crowd, we were all 12 again. We were all watching where it was. We were all just hanging off every word he said. James Mulholland and Al Murray just shut the fuck up and let Darren talk and tell these stories. And it couldn't have been a better way to end a Saturday night of history, is have this guy come on and just talk about that movie and what it meant. And so, I don't care about the helicopter. I don't care about the cod accents. I don't care the fact I don't care the plot is convoluted and stupid and it basically makes no sense. It's an Alistair MacLean novel. What are you going to expect? There's all double cross, triple cross, blah blah blah, and I do not. Again, I do not give a shit. It is pure. It's the kind of movie that makes you love movies. Whereas my earlier pick, Yesterday's Enemy, kind of, as I said, kind of puts you off movies. You're gonna go, oh God, I can't. Give me some light TV on, some reality show about, rich people or something to lighten my intellectual palate. Where Eagles Dare is unashamed, and it's why historians love it. Peter Caddick Adams, the venerable Peter Caddick Adams, former soldier, military analyst, prolific author, loves Where Eagles Dare, like he loves Kelly's Heroes, because it's not trying to tell the story of the German occupation of this. It's not trying to be real. Yeah, there's a kind of a tenuous link to the secrecy of D-Day, but no one, once the bullet starts flying, everyone's forgot what the whole point of the movie was. It's just pure escapism, and that's it. And that, Susan Yu, I was talking about Darren Nesbitt, who played Major Van Harpen. I seem to remember the cathedral was on the other side of the church, of the square. I hope later on we will get to know each other just a little bit better, he says to Mary. And the other thing, my other story, and I'll let you talk, John.
That's fine.
Is about 20 years ago. I was working, I've had lots of jobs in my time. I was working for a guy who sold movie props. And I was a movie collector's fair in London. So I don't remember where it was in London. It was a bit crap. Not many people came through. And our pitch, where we were selling, we had props from Gladiator and things like that. So it was about late 90s, 2000s. Anyway, the person at the next table was Ingrid Pitt, who played Heidi in Where Eagles Dare. And she was selling Seinfeld. And she was in some Hammer films, connecting it back to my first pick. And she hadn't sold much stuff, and we hadn't sold much stuff. But anyway, I spent the evening in the pub with Ingrid Pitt. And and Ingrid Pitt, when she was 7, her and her mum escaped from a concentration camp in Poland. She was she was a World War II veteran in that sense, and she told stories about Christopher Lee and the Hammer films. She told stories about Clint Eastwood, blah blah blah. And I bought a signed photo of her standing with Clint Eastwood, and she had that Polish English accent that she had. And she said, I'm not going to do her accent. I can do Darren Nesbitt as Maids of Honor, but I can't do Ingrid Pitt. But she said, darling, I will give you Clint Eastwood's address, and you can send your photo to him and get it back and get it signed by Clint Eastwood. So I have. In fact, I might find it while you're talking. I have a signed photo of Ingrid Pitt and Clint Eastwood, and I sent in my Kelly's Heroes poster, which I have signed on my wall behind me. So there you are. I rest my case.
Wow.
Where Eagles Dare is always in my top 3. I know it's crap, but it's not crap. It's brilliant. Boom. Hammer drop. Mic drop. I'm out of here. John, over to you.
He has defended himself on this one, everybody. I like
find my photo.
Yeah. Yeah. You got it?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if I can top that, honestly. I have one that's a throwback. There it is. Nice. That's awesome. That you just sent it to Clint Eastwood and he did it.
So it's Ingrid Pitt at the top and Clint Eastwood at the bottom. So that's in my album of signed photos. There we go.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I don't know if I can top it because the chat went nuts over Where Eagles Dare. So I'm going to go with a classic that really impacted me when I wanted to become a World War II interpreter. I wanted to do things a little bit different. I saw everybody who was nicely clean shaven and everything else. And I said, that's not right, because that's not what they showed in the Story of G.I. Joe. So that's my number 1 pick, the Story of G.I. Joe. And directed by William Wellman. And if you don't know much about William Wellman, he joined the Norton Harges Ambulance Corps in World War I. He joined the French Foreign Legion during the First World War, and he was in the Escadrille N-87 during the First War. He earned the nickname Wild Bill while he was there, earned the Croix de Guerre, I think 3 times or twice. He has the different leaves on it. Wellman had 3 confirmed aerial kills, 5 possibles, but was shot down in March of 1918. He walked with a limp the rest of his life. That was because of his crash landing in the First World War. So he's directing this one. Burgess Meredith is Ernie Pyle, as it says there in the sign there. Robert Mitchum is Lieutenant, and then Captain Bill Walker, C Company 18th Infantry, 1st Infantry Division, U.S. Army. The story of an untested infantry company going into their first taste of battle and beyond through the eyes and words of the great Ernie Pyle. Their first time under fire is at Kasserine Pass, where Pyle is watching things from the battalion headquarters. This is the last time Pyle sees the company for several months. So he sees them going in as these greenhorns, as we would say. They've never seen a fight. They get involved in Kasserine Pass and in North Africa, and they kind of disappear from the story for a little bit. And then Pyle, Burgess Meredith, joins up with them again on a road in Italy. And by now, they're hardened by war. They're in front of Monte Cassino. It's pure hell because it's just mud. They're living in dugout caves in the hillside. And it really showcases several incidents that could be seen as what we would call post-traumatic stress in this film. Remember, this is 1945. This film is made. So this is one of the early ones that are coming out of the war effort. And they're showing what they would have called battle fatigue or shell shock or whatever you wish to call it. Back then, it was post-traumatic stress we would today. One soldier is named Warnicki. He suffers a nervous breakdown after a night patrol when they try to get a prisoner, and he's sent away for treatment. Pyle catches up with the men again after Monte Cassino is captured, and his reunion is interrupted by the line of mules carrying the dead GIs to their final resting place. And it kind of goes back to your first pick, Paul, with that dark look at what it's quote really like, you know, what war is really like, the costs and what is the cost of this. Casting for the role of Pyle began in June 1944. With Pyle saying, quote, "For God's sake, don't let them make me look like a fool." And Burgess Meredith was serving with the U.S. Army at the time and needed to get an honorable discharge, which was actually granted for him to get into this role. Meredith spent time with Pyle in New Mexico because Ernie had been recuperating from an accidental bombing in Operation Cobra in Normandy. So he's recuperating from that incident, and he's talking to Meredith about this movie. And it's basically Pyle's, way of saying, okay, this guy's good enough. Bring this guy on. I like him. 9 war correspondents actually were technical advisors on the film, including Don Whitehead, Lee Miller, and Paige Cavanaugh were involved with this. So trying to tell this story of war journalism in a new way. And actually in the scene where Pyle is supposed to get his Pulitzer, 3 of the 9 are in the tent congratulating Burgess Meredith as Pyle for earning the award. The Army agreed to Wellman's request for 150 soldiers total. These men were training in California for deployment to the Pacific. All had been veterans of the Italian campaign. And these extras were on site for 6 weeks of filming in late 1944. The War Department allowed the men to grow beards for the roles. Wellman insisted that actual soldiers speak much of the dialogue for authenticity. And he insisted that the film's actors who weren't soldiers actually spent time, lived, and trained with soldiers. So when we see this come about in later films, especially in the latter part of the 20th century, especially when you see the behind the scenes of Band of Brothers and all this other stuff where they're training as soldiers, they did that for the story of G.I. Joe. This is the grandfather of that kind of move in a way. You can draw that direct line back to Wellman's request to have them live like that. Then in February 1945, Pyle commented about the movie's title, The Story of G.I. Joe. They are still calling it The Story of G.I. Joe. I never did like the title, but nobody could think of a better one, and I was too lazy to try. So they stuck with The Story of G.I. Joe. The film was released 2 months to the day after Pyle was killed in the invasion of Okinawa. And some of the men who were in the movie, the Army extras, actually were on Okinawa as well. So it kind of came full circle with that. The reason I wanted to pick this was because, as I said earlier, when I started reenacting back in the day, everyone was nicely clean shaven and clean and everything like that. And I said, that's not what they look like in Under Fire. And, I took Ernie Pyle's stuff and The Story of G.I. Joe, and we created a small unit where we always had some kind of growth on our face. We were always dirty, and we got kicked out of a USO event one time because we weren't in dress uniform, which is a whole other story. Almost got into a fight with an MP because of these kinds of movies, where it was the old movies who really showed how raw this was, and as much as they could, and showed them not as these clean-cut American boys, going off to war for and finding glory in everything they did. I appreciate the fact that it was real and raw, and it was still going on when it was being filmed. And I thought that was a really unique thing about it. And it's still one of the movies I watch multiple times a year. And Robert Mitchum is just one of my favorites as well. And I that's why I had to go with this for number 1, because it's consistently in my top 3. So what we have in the chat? Does anyone?
Well, I have to say, Don,
people,
an incredibly worthy choice, and you're right. Everything you said about it is absolutely perfect. It's setting the scene for later eras of movie making. It's the realism, the grittiness, and yet still respectful. It's not like gritty for the sake of. It's not like unshaven for the sake of trying to make a statement, except to be real.
Right.
Yeah, so that's a really worthy choice. And Burgess Meredith, for me, as much as any, I don't, Ernie Pyle, we have to mostly judge him by the his writing rather than what we don't know much about what he sounded like and stuff as such, do we? But
yeah,
but Burgess Meredith just seems to capture what I think he was. And Robert Mitchum, was he ever better? I mean, in some ways, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. He's another one up there with Lancaster with me, Robert Mitchum. And man, that one, that might be the one. That might be the thing where it's like you hang your hat on that one. That one's the best. For me.
yeah. No, I mean, in the war film genre, I have to say with you there. So we're getting down to that thing now. We'll gauge the audience in that while you were talking, I was thinking it's the choice now between the burger, the kebab, the pizza that is Where Eagles Dare, and the healthy, worthy choice
No,
of
no,
the Story of G.I. Joe, because we all should be choosing your movie because it's the more important movie. It's making a much more important, valid statement about why, what happens to people in war. It's part of a. It's like a book in that sense. It's adding to our understanding of that generation and what they went through, compared to the burger, the fast food, the calorie full, bad for you cake that is Where Eagles Dare. So we will see now.
I see the way it's going, and everyone likes burgers right now. So
Okay, well, it's yeah, it's we'll see, but yeah, no, Story of G.I. Joe is. I was gonna try and make time to watch it this afternoon, but I didn't in the end.
That's okay.
So, but yeah, what a great film. And it's one of those films that makes you realize that sometimes when Robert Mitchum wasn't trying in his roles, you realize what he could do.
Mhm.
When he turned it on, he really turned it on.
Yeah.
Night of the Hunter and Cape Fear,
Right.
those kind of things. When he really, like William Holden. William Holden is one of my favorite American actors. And you can tell when he was phoning it in, and times when he was really deeply affected by it. And Robert Mitchum, because he would put himself down. He's one of those actors that wouldn't go. You know how there's some of those very, and I'm not saying negative about Daniel Day-Lewis, but they go on, they talk about the craft and the effort involved and the method acting. Robert Mitchum was kind of, know your lines, know where to stand, say your lines, walk off again. That's the kind of thing he always said. Yeah, but he was putting himself down because he had that incredible ability to be a screen actor. For me, he's in that Steve McQueen, Michael Caine category. I'm not saying they couldn't do theatre, but they were quintessential big screen actors where a little movement of an eye, a little subtle movement of the mouth would say something. So when he was just phoning it in, you kind of think, Mitchum, come on, you can do better than that, mate. But then some years you look at his output, he was making 3 or 4 films a year in the late 50s and early 60s, and was still making movies at a big rate when he was getting older as well. He was Sterling Hayden was very good. Came up in there.
That's the thing with me is that I have that kind of feeling with some people who they're constantly getting on me about how I'm editing a video or doing whatever, and I'm just like, I'm a live person. I like to just like you. I like to just go live with everyone. I love talking to everyone, chat like tonight. It's what I like to do. And some actors are into that kind of method stuff, and they're off doing their own thing. And then some, they just turn the camera on and they go. And I'm like, that's the kind of person that I can connect
that's
with.
more me. Yeah, that's the music I like is your punk, your rockabilly, your kind of people standing around playing music's live rather than the overly produced stuff. But then sometimes I like something from the other thing. And I want to address a comment that came up way earlier about Ice Cold in Alex, the British classic with John Mills and Harry Andrews and Sylvia Sims. And it is, I agree, it's a phenomenally fantastic movie. But for me, it's not really a war movie. It's a thriller that happens to be set in World War II. It's like Wages of Fear, the classic French film about moving that, which has just been remade, I think, in France, about transporting the gelignite or the liquid explosive. What's it called? Not gelignite. Nitroglycerin, is it?
Oh, nitroglycerin, yeah.
And so Ice Cold Alex about getting an ambulance back in North Africa after the fall of Tobruk is set in the war, but the setting is separate in some ways to the predicament. In that, I would kind of argue that Casualties of War is not a Vietnam film in that way. It's a male violence kind of movie against a woman that happened to be set in a war setting. So, but that's my own criteria, which is like the boys from Brazil came. Someone said, "Is that a World War II movie?" Well, it's not a World War II movie, but it's kind of it's all about World War II. So, you know, we all have different parameters on what is and isn't part of the genre. Like Rogue One for me, the Star Wars film is a war movie first, the Star Wars movie second.
Yeah,
it's a classic men on a mission behind enemy lines with a woman leader, but it is the Dirty Dozen. It's guns and it's where equals dare. Rogue One is almost the Guns of Navarone where equals dare movie set in the Star Wars universe.
And it's the Shakespearean tragedy that I love.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's why I still say it's the best Star Wars movie.
It is
that's because I'm into the tragedies.
So. No, we agree. We're ending. We're getting towards the end on a nice agreement. So there we are.
Yes. And I will tell you, you took me a task on this one. It's the 77-23 Where Eagles Dare.
Wow. So we are burger kebab people.
Yeah.
We are donuts in the bag full rather than worthy salads. That's good to know that our combined audience are that kind of people. They're my kind of people.
Yeah, there you go. Burgers and hot dogs, everybody. Anyone on here who in the chat who has come over from my channel, please go over to Paul's channel and give him a subscription, please. I would greatly appreciate that. This is one way that we can all help each other out.
And vice versa.
Thank you, Paul.
People from my channel, subscribe to John.
Thank you. I love to help to make the tent bigger, as it were, this circus tent of history nerddom. You know, and like I said earlier, it's not a competition, even though we have a poll question and the thing. This and my life in general, I don't compete with people. I like to work with people. And when I met Paul, we you know, really agreed on that front anyway. It's just make it fun and make it enjoyable for as many as you can. And it was great meeting you, Paul, while I was overseas. And I'm actually coming back in October. So
cool.
Yeah, I have a like over half a day free in your town. So
wow. Well, we'll do it again then. Cool.
I'll be around.
So,
go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, it's been great, and there's some great suggestions come up in the sidebar of things. So yeah, that would probably make it. I was coming back on the night ferry from Portsmouth back to Ouistreham a few years ago after seeing the Damned over there in concert. And there was four of us. Didn't really want to go back to our crowded cabin. We were all a bit hungover and stuff. So we just sat in the bar pretty much all night doing our favorite 5 albums of all time. And the 5 we started with at the beginning of the night were completely different away from the 5 we ended up in. We went for all sorts of genres and, you know, country and western and rock and pop and rockabilly and heavy metal and punk and stuff. And except all 4 of us had London Calling by The Clash in our 5, and that never shifted out. So that's interesting. But these things are fluid. As we started, you know, there was some great ideas there that I think, well, maybe that should have been there. But you know, it's opinions are subjective.
Yeah, I mean, it like we said, we could do this again in 2 months, and we could have 2 different lists. At least 1 or 2 might be switched around, or may have been bumped. And you know, that's just the way these top 3 things work, right? And there were some great examples in the chat as well, where I thought, wow, I haven't seen that in 20 years. I forgot about that one, and so now I'm going to look back at the chat and, you know, make a new list of things to watch or old things to watch I haven't seen in a while, because I've forgotten about a couple of them. And I saw some others who were putting in just their, like we said earlier, their general top 3 war movies in general. And I think that's fantastic. You know, that could be live at a different time, because someone mentioned the old movie Waterloo, which would be in my top 3, especially considering the new Napoleon movie. But yeah, there's some great stuff going on in the chat, and I want to thank everyone who came over from Paul's channel that hung out over here on my little channel. It means a lot to me that you're here. Thank you to all of my peeps who hung out and just, you know, enjoyed the evening. I hope you enjoyed the evening. Thank you for voting for both of us. No favoritism.
Yeah, if I'd lost all 3, I'd have felt really. I've gone away feeling really, really small. But I redeemed myself with that consolation goal at the end. You know, wasn't completely thrashed. Didn't have my ass handed to me on a plate. It was all right. I came away, bit of pride intact.
Yeah, it makes me wonder too, like if my pick would have been like Das Boot as number one and Where Eagles Dare.
I did think about the order we picked them, whether that
Yeah.
would have made a difference.
Yeah. It's almost
Because
like,
my Yesterday's Enemy was your Story of G.I. Joe in a sense. They were kind of the similar ones maybe, but then the other two I don't know. But yeah. We can do it again. We'll do a rematch. We'll do,
we did it with top three forts where we picked the style of fort per position. So maybe it has to be that way with the movie where it's like a black and white, a Technicolor, and a modern or a contemporary or something like that. And that'll be the 3-2-1 and see how it rolls.
Or we could do a war movie rematch on my channel, or we could stream to both channels. You come back and do it again, but I couldn't have them to sing the football question. One of your guys, Aaron, one of your guys, which footy club is Paul's favourite? Grim just answered. Ipswich, back in the Premier League, baby. After 22 years away, we're back up there with the big boys. Ipswich Town fan since 1977 when I was 8 years old. And we're back up. We're back in the big leagues again now. So, yeah, the Tractor Boys, the mighty Tractor Boys, born and bred. That's it. And my American football team is Kansas City Chiefs. But I don't really care. It's just I know Donnie Edwards, who was a linebacker for them for many years. So I have a Kansas City Chiefs shirt, jersey, you call it over there, don't you? In my cupboard over there. So that's my American team.
Awesome. There you go. I knew that. Oh, we have some feedback coming.
Yeah, well, screw you. I don't care.
There you go. Well, Paul, this has been great. I really appreciate your time. I know you've been streaming today and it's late, and I want to let you go so you can get some sleep, but I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for giving us such an awesome list.
No, I've enjoyed every minute of it. I love talking movies. It's my other thing I talk about apart from real history. I've got a collection of over 1,000 on my hard drive. Some really obscure ones. I love the Russian ones, the Polish ones, Czech films, things like that. So it's another passion of mine that I don't get enough chance to indulge. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Oh, you're very welcome. And thank you everyone in the chat again. We appreciate each and every one of you for hanging out and being a part of this and voting and putting in the comments your favorite films and putting us down for our choices and propping us up for our choices. It doesn't matter. It's all in fun. We really thank each and every one of you. Hope everybody has a great night, and don't forget to subscribe to the channels. Give Paul some love, and that would mean a lot to me if we help each other out. I hope everyone has a great evening. Now go watch a movie, everybody. Take care.
Indeed.